Good afternoon and welcome to this Jerusalem Press Club briefing. I'm SD Ari, Press Director. Last night, Israel time, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu met in the Oval Office during the Prime Minister's world trip to DC and took questions from the press. The press briefing focused on tariffs, Iran, and Gaza, and to help us deconstruct the visit and what it means for Israel, we're joined by Professor Eytan Gilboa, expert on U.S.-Israel relations and senior fellow at the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies, Bar-Ilan University. Thank you so much, Professor Gilboa, for joining us.
Thank you.
I found yesterday's press briefing in the Oval Office really interesting. After opening comments from both the president and the prime minister, the majority of the discussion focused on tariffs, which is no big surprise. But I was also struck by how the prime minister handled the situation, even when the president said things that were no doubt difficult for the prime minister to hear, including being non-committal regarding the reduction of tariffs, starting direct talks with Iran, and how we can help with Turkey as long as Israel is, quote, reasonable. So I'm wondering how much of this is perhaps the Zelensky effect in the Oval Office? Are things different behind the scenes? And also, I guess the overarching question is, what was the purpose of this unscheduled and hurried summons by the president to the prime minister? I know I've just packed a lot of things in that question, but if you can take a stab at unpacking this for us, I'd appreciate that.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you very much for the introduction. Every time Prime Minister Netanyahu meets President Trump, there's some kind of a surprise. And yesterday, the surprise, I think, was the announcement by Trump that the United States is negotiating with Iran on negotiation. This is the stage that the two sides are in now. Trump said that on Saturday, negotiations will begin with Iran on its nuclear program, and that it's going to be conducted at a high level, no specification, but at high level, and that these are going to be direct talks. I think that Netanyahu probably heard about it during his inside the White House when he spoke to Netanyahu in private, but this attitude of the United States is not compatible with the Israeli interests as Netanyahu has expressed them over time. Netanyahu does not believe in negotiations. He does not believe that they will produce an agreement. And if they will produce an agreement, Iran is not going to implement it. Netanyahu has been advocating a military action, preferably only by the United States or by the United States together with Israel. So right now, this military option is gone. It's not in the making. As long as negotiations with Iran are going to be held, there's no military option. Yes, Trump, as usual, has threatened Iran, saying if the negotiations are not going to be successful, Iran is going to be in trouble, and he was referring to a potential military action. I need to say that Trump has assembled an impressive military force in the region to back up his threats to bomb Iran if it continued to refuse to begin to come to the table. But he is not interested in implementing his threats or use force. He is not interested in starting a war in the Middle East that could be very detrimental to American allies. So this is about Iran, and I consider that to be the number one important issue as far as Israel is concerned. Secondly, at least on the face of it, Netanyahu explained that he was going to Washington to talk about the 70% tariff Trump imposed specifically on Israel. And he said in the press conference, he said that Israel has already eliminated tariffs on American goods and services, and that Israel is going to reduce the trade balance with the United States. Yet Trump said, well, we will see if we could reduce the tariff for Israel. He did not commit himself. He said, or he reminded the audience that the United States is giving Israel $4 billion a year. So perhaps there is no room for any reduction in the tariff. But I would like to remind the president that most, if not all, of that aid is invested in the United States. This money is given to Israel for the purchasing of American weapons and munition, and therefore it provides work for American factories and manpower. So this immediate issue, I think Netanyahu failed to obtain a positive result. He thought he could get the president at least to say that, oh, this is very good. He said, actually, he said so. He said it's very good that Israel is now eliminating customs and tariffs on U.S. goods, and will be attempting to reduce the trade deficit. However, it would be better for Netanyahu if he had said, well, this is a good step. This is a good step in the direction of perhaps changing American tariff on Israel. And he also said many countries are now appealing to President Trump to negotiate tariffs. So I think this issue has been disappointing to Netanyahu and his followers, because his officials have hinted that perhaps the president will come up with a better policy for Israel. I also identified some gap between Israel and the United States on Gaza and the hostages. The president said that he is very interested in another deal to release the hostages and in ceasefire. The two go hand in hand. Now, this issue is a very, and he seems to say that his timetable is short. He said we need that fast or soon. And I want to mention here Trump's timetable. He will be going to Saudi Arabia in about 3 weeks, and he's keen on achieving a normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel, perhaps in that visit. And to do that, he needs complete ceasefire and a durable ceasefire in Gaza, and also releasing of the hostages. He wants that issue to be resolved by the time he goes to Saudi Arabia in about 6 weeks. He gave that ultimatum to Iran. So we understand that Iran is coming to the table. But the normalization with Saudi Arabia is also designed to apply much pressure on Iran, because the whole idea of building a Middle Eastern treaty organization is to stand against Iran. So sorry for that. Normalization in Saudi Arabia, Trump thinks would even more softer Iranian terms for perhaps a nuclear deal. We know that these negotiations will take some time. So about Turkey, the president said, "Oh, no, I know Erdogan. He's a friend of mine." Well, he admires people like Erdogan, authoritarian leaders. He says, I have good relations with him, and if Israel has a problem, then I'll call on him. The issue of Turkey, the Turkey issue is important for Syria. First of all, Erdogan, since the beginning of the war in Gaza, but even recently, has said terrible things about Israel. He said Israel should be eliminated. This would have taken him to the International Criminal Court of Justice had it dealt only with intentions rather than actions. But the problem is in Syria. It seems that Turkey is exploiting the support it has given to Jolani in removing the Assad regime from Syria. They have expressed interest in building military presence in several Air Force bases, former Air Force bases. This is the reason why Israel has bombed them to deny Erdogan the ability to use them. So if you combine the present very extreme Erdogan's ideology toward Israel and his military presence in Syria, this is not a good recipe for stability in Syria. So Trump said, well, I'll talk to him. Trump has some influence on Erdogan, but it would take much more than just giving him a call to perhaps convince Erdogan that he should not challenge Israel militarily in Syria, and that he should forget about using Syria as a place or as a starting point for challenging Israel. So I think I've covered some of the issues that were important issues that were raised in this press conference. Trump, he speaks he speaks all over the place, and it takes a lot of time. Usually presidents are designing and organizing press conferences in a much more orderly way. But I have not seen that with Trump's press conferences ever. He's very direct, and he repeats things that he wants his audiences to, when he wants to convince his audiences about his intentions. And I think many people don't take him seriously, but I think everybody should take him very seriously, because he is not a typical American politician or a typical American president. He is non-president, as much as you can tell from history and theory of presidential behavior. But I think everybody should take him very seriously. And yesterday, he also repeated his dream about evacuating Gaza and owning Gaza and building Gaza like Manhattan. So this idea, we thought this idea has gone away. Again, he mentioned that yesterday. So I would take all of his, most of his statements very seriously, because he is very direct, and seems to be implementing those ideas. When he was asked about tariffs, it seemed that he's very tough about it, and he said, yes, everybody's going to come to me to talk about tariffs and trade deficits and currency manipulations. He likes that. He likes to be at the center of the world. Everybody would come to him to negotiate with the United States certain issues. But this attitude creates instability in the international system in general, and right now in the economic international system in particular. And you asked me about effects on Israel. Everything Trump does has some effects on Israel, even if it's globally applicable. And Israel should better prepare for the kind of reforms Trump is preparing for changing the present international system. Thank you.
Okay, there's a lot there, and you certainly did address everything that I had raised in my initial question, which of course leads to additional questions, some that have come in and some that I thought about as you were speaking, and I'm going to kind of just combine them here. One of them is, you mentioned a lot of things in response to, President Trump has put 17% tariffs on Israeli goods. Israel had tried to preempt that move even before it was announced. Prime Minister Netanyahu certainly said that he was going to balance the trade deficit, so to speak, when he sat in the Oval Office. And yet you made many cases, showing that in fact, there's other issues. And I'm wondering, and others are wondering this as well, were those cases, do you think, did Netanyahu put those cases to the American administration in private meetings? Considering, the bar set with the previous Oval Office meeting with Zelensky, did he have any choice but to sit there kind of and listen? And was that considered a success? The fact that the Oval Office meeting went well, there was no blow up, things that the conversation went well, everyone parted with smiles. So is that considered a success? And do you think that the conversation behind the scenes is different than the conversation that we're seeing in front? And I would just add one more thing about that, which is the Iran issue. Same question. Is this something that we're seeing for the camera, so to speak, and perhaps something else going on behind the scenes? We're seeing, THAAD units coming to Israel. What's going on with that?
My assumption is that what is being discussed behind closed doors is not necessarily coming up in press conferences or in. This was supposed to be like a follow-up opportunity, no more than that, not a long press conference. I think that when Netanyahu heard about the beginning of those negotiations between Iran and the United States, he was discussing, okay, what does it mean? And one issue, for example, would be the length of those negotiations, because Iran is known for exploiting negotiations endlessly to avoid any restrictions about its nuclear program. And then Trump is always presents some kind of a deadline. As a businessman, his approach to international relations in general is of a businessman. This is how he had approached the Gaza issue, for example. And so one question is, how long will these negotiations be held? Number two, is the United States seeking complete dismantling of the nuclear Iranian program? Because in the past, the Obama and the Biden administrations set only the suspension of development in the nuclear program, not elimination of it. So how much President Trump is committed not only to stop the program, but to reduce and to eliminate the nuclear facilities to the point where they could be used only for peaceful purposes. Number three is, would the agreement include other issues, such as the missile program or Iranian support for its proxies in the region? I think that the United States attacks, constant attacks about the Houthis in Yemen, also played a role in convincing Iran to begin negotiations. Trump demonstrated, okay, I would not allow Houthis to disrupt navigation in international shipping routes. He considers them like pirates, so they have to be eliminated. And this showed Iran And he said, this is a message to Iran, any military act by the Houthis, I consider that to be an Iranian-sponsored activity. So the question is going to be whether or not, this is number three, whether or not the president would include in the negotiations issues other than the specific military, specific nuclear program. Another issue is inspection and verification, how the United States would make sure if there is an agreement. And I said earlier that given the history of negotiations, Iran is unlikely to fully adhere to an agreement. Okay, say how you verify that, and if Iran does not comply with the agreement, what you're going to do about it, and finally, if the negotiations were not successful, what are you going to do about it? You said that if Iran does not accept an agreement, then the United States would use other options. He said, if I remember correctly, it's going to be very bad for Iran, for Iranians. And he also said, and he used to say that about other global issues such as the North Korean nuclear program, maybe about Gaza as well. He said, okay, if you do what I say you should do, then you're going to be you would be living in peace and prosperity. Everything is going to be nice in Iran. So this is just the other side of the coin. If you do not accept an agreement, you will see hell. And if you accept the agreement, you're going to be living in some kind of a Garden of Eden. So I think these are some of the questions that, and also in response to what Trump would have said, Netanyahu perhaps expressed Israeli concerns or his concerns about all these issues.
Certainly, so many issues on the table, I'm sure that they had going on with there. You mentioned also that there's a sort of deadline in the air with the President Trump's upcoming trip to Saudi Arabia. And so do you expect then that there is an actual deal, a ceasefire hostage deal of some kind, to be seen before that visit? And is this visit, meaning the Prime Minister's visit to DC, is that part of that development? So I mean that we're talking about, just a few weeks if things remain on schedule.
So I think that resolving the hostages issue, as well as getting a ceasefire in Gaza, are keys for a successful Trump's visit in Saudi Arabia. So I am assuming that the United States will be applying much pressure on both Israel and Hamas via Egypt and Qatar to come up with a solution that at least will bring a ceasefire, a temporary ceasefire for say 50 days or 60 days. This would be good because this is a timetable Trump will be going through. So if the sides do not make progress in negotiations over a hostage deal and a ceasefire, then I think Trump is going to be angry. And when he is angry, he has applied more pressure. He is applying more pressure. Stephen Witkoff, his special emissary, was there at the meeting. He is also likely to be the negotiator with Iran. I'm not so sure about that. But if this is the case, then the linkage between Gaza, Saudi Arabia, and Iran is very powerful. And so I expect some pressure from the United States, also on Israel. If Israel turn to be the side that is subverting the chance for hostages release and ceasefire, then I could see some tough pressure on Israel to move forward.
Okay, I was going to ask another question that had come in, but I'm just going to follow up on that one right now. Would that mean that the United States would say to Israel, okay, well, I know you want to destroy Hamas's capabilities, but that's just not important right now?
Yes, I think we need to distinguish between goals and means. This would be true for Gaza as well as for Iran. So there's much agreement that Hamas should not be should be removed from Gaza, and this was repeated by Netanyahu and Trump as well. And there's agreement that Iran could not become a nuclear power. But the question is then, what means you use in order to achieve these goals? And Israel told Trump, Hamas is not interested in any agreement. They are using the time, exploiting the time, but they are not coming up with a serious proposal. They are suggesting what release of 5 hostages, 50 days. This is not acceptable. It's not acceptable to the U.S. position as well, because Trump used to say, "I want to see all the hostages released in one take." He didn't like that. Releasing of 1 hostage, 2 hostages every week. So the question here is how, number one, not only you release all the hostages and get a ceasefire, uh, like a permanent ceasefire, which also would mean the withdrawal of Israel from key positions in Gaza, something that Hamas has been demanding for a long time. So the question is how you get Hamas out from that. And for that purpose, the United States would need help and assistance from its Arab allies, especially Egypt and Qatar and Jordan. So Trump said, I want all the Palestinians out of Gaza. I want to rebuild Gaza. You have a better idea? Come up with a better idea. So there is a proposal by the Arab League, but it is a non-starter, both for Israel and the United States. So the question is, and I'm assuming this issue was discussed yesterday, how you get Hamas out in order to assure a much longer and permanent ceasefire in Gaza, that this is a condition for other solutions in the region, specifically this focus on Saudi Arabia. It is no secret that Trump wants to win the Nobel Peace Prize. He presents himself as a man of peace. So he wants to end wars, not to begin wars. And therefore, I believe that more discussion, serious discussion, will have to be conducted by the two sides in order to clarify that issue of means, how to get to the goals that the two sides completely agree on.
Listen, a winning peace prize is always fun, so that's why not? um, but I do think there's a lot that you talked about here that is very 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 important, very significant, and certainly discussions that are going on. And one of the things that you touched on earlier that I think are also part of this, which is what's going on in Syria and the discussions between with Turkey and everything else. Is there a divergence of interests between the U.S. and Israel in Syria, and how does that play out? Now we only have a few minutes, so I'll ask you this question, and then we're going to wrap with our last questions that have come in.
Okay, I think the practical issue in Syria is this: the United States has about 2,000 soldiers in Iraq and Syria. Their original mission has been to fight the remnants of the Islamic of ISIS, the Islamic State, and perhaps other Islamic terrorist organizations. And there were talks about eliminating this role and bring those soldiers back to the United States and their mission in Iraq and Syria. Iraq has officially asked the United States to withdraw from those places in Iraq on the border. So I think the first thing is to convince the United States, don't get out, stay there. Perhaps even increase your presence, military presence there, as a counterbalance for both Turkey and Russia. I need to mention that Russia still has bases, both Air Force base and a naval base in Syria. So in order to balance both Turkey and Russia, the United States has to maintain that presence and make sure that its interests, which in this case are compatible with Israeli interests, be kept.
Okay, this is a very busy news day and it's a very busy week in general. So we're going to keep this a short briefing for today. I would just ask, I guess, one final question, which is if you had to sum up, was this a successful visit for the Prime Minister in Israel and Washington?
It was not successful because he did not get what he wanted, that reduction in tariff to Israel. The president said exactly the opposite. I'm not so sure that I would reduce the tariff. So this is number one. Number two, I think there is a growing gap between the United States and Israel on Iran. And it seems now that the military option is off the table. And about the other issues, it's not clear. I do not see any American new proposal for the releasing of the hostages and the ceasefire in Gaza. I think Netanyahu is interested in increasing the military pressure in Gaza, not reducing it. I don't think he would like to withdraw forces from Gaza. This is again not compatible with American interests. So I see some gaps here, and I think the challenge. So in that sense, the meeting I think was not that successful. Yes, it's interesting. It's important for an Israeli prime minister to sit next to Trump and get much praise from Trump on all kinds of issues, but this is insufficient. And I need also to say Trump is probably the person that most of the world hate these days. And the reason for that is his trade wars. So I'm not so sure it's a big asset just to sit next to Trump. Netanyahu himself is also not that popular in the United States or elsewhere. So I would say that, some people say, mixed results, that term, mixed results. I think if these were mixed results, they are very close to a failure rather than success.
There's a lot to think about, and I could certainly continue talking with you about this for quite some time. I would just say, in light of what you just said, though, I wonder, did the Prime Minister have even the option to say to the President, well, no, thank you, I'm not going to come visit you as you invited me? There's no option for that.
No option.
No
No
option.
no option to refuse a visit. And I would add, no option to say no to Trump. After Netanyahu has defined Trump as the greatest friend of Israel ever to serve at the White House, and Trump repeated that yesterday on himself, it would be extremely difficult for Netanyahu to say no to anything Trump would demand from him.
Indeed. Well, we can see, the news cycle we know here changes so quickly. Everything changes quickly. So we'll see what happens in the coming days and weeks and months. But certainly, thank you very much for your insight. I appreciate it. And thank you very much to my colleagues, Jonathan Beck and Ali Naor, for facilitating this webinar. This webinar will also be posted on our YouTube channel. And I'd also take the opportunity to wish you best wishes for a happy Passover. And on this holiday of liberation, we also hope to see the liberation of the 59 hostages still being held in Gaza. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you for the invitation to appear in that program.
Our pleasure. We look forward to the good end.
Thank you.